Who do you think should be innovating and moving us forward into the future?
Innovation, leave it to somebody else.
Oh.
We don't have time for that.
I didn't expect you to say that. We're talking today about R&D type of work, new development features, breaking into new markets. Some people call it 0 to 1.
Yeah. Some people believe in letting someone else do all of that innovation. And they believe that doing this will free them up to do other things. Or maybe they can rely on specialist expertise that these other people bring to inject innovation into their teams.
We probably could find some benefit out of both sides of the equation. Again, I believe in you build it, you own it. So why would you spend a bunch of time with your developers and your development team learning the customers and the customer pain points and then say, yeah, but all the new features are going to be built by this other team? That doesn't seem right to me. Just the cognitive dissonance of trying to square that statement in my head.
There seems to be a gap there, but it might be contextual if we're arguing the other side. Maybe innovation into newer things, new technologies perhaps, requires skill sets that we don't possess currently. So we're hiring that, bringing other people in to do this work for us, the ideation, the innovation, and so forth. I do agree there are pros and cons.
Let's start with that category. In order to innovate, we have product teams maintaining our current products, right? And we want to bring in people with very specialized skill set to take our current products or pieces of our current products and launch us ahead. The immediate one everyone would think of here is AI, but also data science, like mathematical algorithms and stuff like that to work inside of our data sets, how we can change things to make a little more sense out of the data that we have. That's a good one here. Back when big data was the meaningless term that everyone used to use.
Big data and Hadoop.
Like I worked on a, hey, you keep your Hadoop to yourself. Thank you very much. I worked on a big data platform where they were trying to basically build a catalog when you went to build dashboards and stuff. All the big data is in the catalog. You just grab the fields from the catalog that you want. And that was a dream. They never did that, but that was a dream. And we certainly had like people on the team that said like, whoa, they have a very special skill set. No one else has that skill set. So we need to have them do all their work up front. Yeah, that point was used in that instance. So I'm pitching it as I'm about to defend it. But also I lived through it, so it was a train wreck.
It created that dependency, right? But you couldn't move ahead unless your dependency was met as a kind of predecessor. So emerging technologies that you don't have skills for, that's a case, right? Yeah. Ideally, you would want your team skilled up in that.
Right, yeah. I mean, that was the first thing I thought of is like, well, I need to bring in a data scientist to do whatever. Like, how is that any different from, well, my team has to go out and pound the pavement and bring in leads and get sales across the finish line. So can I get a salesperson to sit with my team and bring my team in when the account management calls are happening or when the new sales demos are happening? Like, can you bring my team members in to those demos so we actually can pitch and talk about our product that you're trying to sell for us? The typical sales organization is completely divorced.
Oh yeah.
From like that's not like the more effective ones where you're going. It's funny, it's not even in our notes. I'm sure it's not in our notes. The same thing we're talking about now, we're talking about adding specialist skill sets to your team. Nobody on the team knows Kubernetes or Docker deployments. Nobody knows how to deploy via whatever, GitHub actions. Okay, cool. Then you break somebody off for a sprint. They learn how to do it. Now we know how to do it. This is an odd arguing point of like, we got to go out and hire someone specific, this specialist to do this specialist thing. Because from my perspective, like corporate finance, HR for hiring people, recruiting and hiring people, posting jobs, marketing when it's time to hit the street with marketing materials. We have a dozen in-house specialties and we somehow mesh those and make those part of our normal workday. How is this any different?
The only argument against that would be that team members can't be left alone for a sprint to learn this stuff. Maybe you need to send them to a class or bring someone in to train you, but that's very short-lived. Once they learn this stuff, they practice it on their own time. But to actually have someone do it on a sustainable level, that is definitely an argument I cannot get behind.
I mean, let's say you're a founder at a tech startup. Any startup, maybe you pay a product coach to come in every week, spend half a day to help you get your roadmaps ready, stand in front of customers, double check that what you're doing with like MVPs to make sure you're not building too much and not wasting money. Like just paying a consultant is what I'm saying.
But that's not innovation. That's simply getting the help you need in your practices.
Right. But you apply that technique of like, I'm hiring a product coach because I know I'm not great at product, to this other technology of, I think we should have AI agents at the heart of all of our software now. Maybe we need to get somebody in who knows a lot about AI agents and then embed them with my team for the next 4 sprints. They and my team together kind of cross-pollinate the skill. Maybe they need to stay around longer than that, 6 months, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Doesn't matter what skill it is and what time frame we're talking about. The structure is the same. You have found a critical skill that your team has not had before. You need to add it to your team somehow. So make that process happen. Don't say, my team doesn't have this skill, so I'm going to take this thing that I need and I'm going to have the adults create it and I'm going to give it back to you kids.
To play it back, what I'm hearing is you don't outsource that innovation completely. You enable your teams over time to learn those skills so that when you outsource, what happens is when those people go away, whether it's a company or individuals, they take the knowledge with them. That leaves a void in your team that at that point you're scrambling. You may have your product out in the wild. You have paying customers. You cannot afford to not have that in your team. So don't outsource it on any kind of sustainable level. Get your teams to learn it. They can come in, work with you, and maybe explicitly have some of those knowledge sharing sessions so that your team can be enabled and learn.
So I think both of us with we have to have specialist knowledge and bring them in to accelerate the integration of specialist technologies into our products.
Yep.
So you may need to bring in special talent. So I'm going to award 10 points for that on this side. But also we both sort of naturally gravitated to the other side of like, yeah, you should bring in knowledge, but also like you're bringing it back into the team that has to maintain and build this stuff.
Yeah, enable your
like,
team.
Why wouldn't you enable your team in the first place? You don't need a different team to do this. It's just your team.
Correct.
So 1,000 points for against.
Jackpot.
Yeah. All right. All right. So let's move on to the next category, which we already have been sort of talking about. And I want to pitch this one to you, and I'll actually try to defend this one. Okay. So if we have a special team that just does MVP development and launching with customers to try new ideas, that's all they do. We take that away from the teams. We just have the special team do it. Maybe the team still can do it if they want, but the purpose of this other team is just to try to launch MVP ideas and see what hits. They can run around all the products in my portfolio and be constantly probing for what's going to hit with customers. And basically they can accelerate any one product by just doing this full time. You have to assume that the team, you've hired people and you've honed the team where the people you have on the team are very good at doing stuff from the ground up, like clickable wireframes that connect to real data. Because like, for example, a lot of people don't know. People are surprised when I tell them Figma, you can connect Figma to a real data source. Like you can connect to a database or a spreadsheet so the data can be dynamic. You can be on the back end. Remember the old like
ignore the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, the old demos where somebody was behind the thing, like changing the data or whatever. Yeah. You can do that kind of demo, and the customer, they would never, it's not a real product unless they're a certain level of savvy with software development. Right. Or if they right click, because in Figma you right click, it shows you all the clickable elements. Anyway, I don't know if I'm giving away secrets.
Don't right click.
Yeah.
Demo people.
It allows you to test the diversity of your portfolio constantly, testing the outside bounds of your portfolio. Otherwise, teams sometimes get caught up in feature development or infrastructure stuff that they're told to do, and they don't always reserve time to break out and do something radically different. It's the whole, everyone's riding horses. You can't iterate your way into like creating a car. You need a big leap. Yeah. So what would you say to the concept of like, if you have a team that's constantly probing the edges of your business, they can make these breakthroughs, and then when they prove an idea, a true MVP, they can bring it back to your team, lay it out, and help your team and your product manager adjust their roadmap and quarterly goals.
Yeah, it's workable, I think, as a model, but here's what I think might be a challenge with that, right? If you've got that specialist team doing this work with the client and your development teams over here, aren't they divorced from the client a little bit so they don't hear firsthand and have the opportunity to ask questions firsthand? Get that feedback. They're hearing secondhand. So there's that issue that you have to get around.
I think if I'm going to push back against that, that is valid. I think a way to nullify what you just pointed out was you bring the product manager or product managers, you bring them with you, and you rely on them to get you, meaning the person on the innovation team, in front of their customers. You're sort of hijacking good working processes to try your new stuff. That's fine. It's fine. This is the first time I'm working through this talking point, so trust me, it's a better idea in my head than it came out of my mouth. Said Brian never in his life, but you're basically using all the customer connections to probe new ideas. That actually seems like a benefit to me. It seems like a counterbalance to this, because the product manager or whoever has these customer contacts, they would probably be very standoffish about letting you go in front of their customers if your idea is not great. Cannibalizing features are dangerous. They probably would push back, and that is probably your signal if you're the person on this innovation team.
These guys away. Yeah.
I don't really have a great idea or whatever. What do you think about that?
No, I think that's legit. I think you can adopt this model to suit your purpose. So maybe even have your salespeople in on that, right? So they're aware of what is actually being talked about, quote unquote, under the hood. Oftentimes they don't really know what's going on under the hood. So yeah, you could adopt this model in any way you want, right? And the way you've described it, there's probably a happy medium there, right? You could say, well, maybe have your tech lead present.
Right.
Have your product people present as well. Do a dry run first with your internal product people and then go in front of a customer. There's different ways of doing this.
Sure.
I don't think there's a black and white here.
I like this idea. I think this is probably one of the stronger points we will present today, of the idea of, hey, this one team can always be pushing the boundaries to launch you ahead. The issue with this, at some point in poker, we have to put our cards down on the table, and you will see, Michael, I have 4 of a kind, but that fifth card is corporate finance is going to look at this team and be like, this team makes me no money. So I understand you're pushing the edges of my portfolio. What is the ROI of pushing the edges of my portfolio? Given that the revenue never goes back to this innovation team, it goes back to the product team that implements if you actually push an edge of your portfolio, and I think there's a real market for this particular thing that we developed, like a tiny widget that's not automated at all. You guys should take it into your roadmap, do 3 months of work on it, push it out, and now you've got plus 15% revenue year over year. It's like, how many companies are willing to staff a team to do something like this, where the revenue can only be measured months and months in the future, if not years in the future, and then cannot be directly tied back permanently to the other team?
I concur with that. I think from a bean counters point of view, this is hard. But if your innovation team is not very large, you might be able to do it. It should not be very large. Agreed. You could have like a conglomerate, for example. Right? Say you're Unilever and you have a whole series of product portfolios. Yeah. Every portfolio could have a team of 1 or 2 potentially, and that's still absorbable. It's like the cost of doing business. It's the internal people. Like those bean counters themselves aren't making any money directly. So there's an argument to be made there. But also the counterpoint is, if you have too many people there, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb on their spreadsheet. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's a balance to be had.
Well, this was a good category. I feel like it's probably the best point we're going to make.
4. Yeah.
So on that, I think I'll award 100 points 4, and on the against category, I'll award it 1 monkey. 3 monkeys with bananas. That's right. Cool. I don't know how to draw a banana.
You know how to draw a monkey?
Yeah, it's a stick figure with big arms. All right, 3 monkeys and 3 bananas.
There you go. We're equal opportunity ape.
That's exactly right. Let's go down to what I think is another strong candidate for this one. Another one that should be for the innovation team is that it creates strategic level initiatives. Because like what I was talking about, you're pushing the boundaries of what your products can do, and you're going for a breakthrough. And at the leadership team, they'll say, well, this effort is strategic. And what they really mean by the words, quote, strategic is, I don't care how much money it costs. I've got to have it.
Right.
I've got to have this breakthrough, and the breakthrough doesn't have to pay for itself right now, or quarter to quarter or whatever if you're quarterly capitalism. Yeah. However, you're saying that having a separate team outside of the normal teams somehow encourages alignment with strategic goals, strategic initiatives. That's a tough one for me. I understand the concept. Like, think about a typical product. If I'm going to defend this one, I guess that's what I'm doing this podcast. I'm defending all these. If you have this innovation team and they're separate from your product teams, their roadmap gets populated just like a normal product manager's roadmap gets populated. They're talking to like the head of the business, the C-level people probably, or maybe like director level people in a larger organization, to say, what boundaries should we test? What new markets should we probe? So you're saying this team is trying to innovate, but they're restricting themselves only to the strategic level of the organization.
Yep.
So their roadmap is directly contributing to figuring out our strategic direction. They're almost like a test team. Oh, there, you're not allowed to say test team.
Ooh.
Testers are like, ooh, that's an offshore thing. We want to fire all of the testers. It's almost like people whose job it is to test, but the thing that they're testing is strategic initiatives, viability, business viability against a certain market.
Yeah, they're trying to scope out potentially viable products. Their roadmap nicely fulfills the organizational strategic roadmap.
Right.
That's all good. The executives feel good about that because they can see that. Oh yeah, look at this team. They're doing exactly what our vision is being fulfilled, right? The problem is, how do you justify that team? Because there is no ROI on that. It's not that it's hard to measure. There is nothing, because whatever they're doing, to your point about doing tests, and these aren't even hard tests often, right? In that sense of the word, they're basically just surveys, polls, maybe some vaporware that's being produced to kind of feel out the customers. There's no ROI there. The difficulty is, how long are they funded before someone says, hey, we're wasting money here?
I think that's the problem you have to solve first, though. Your financial model needs to be corrected where you can tie ROI to this team. If a team is picking up ideas and concepts that were first vetted and given the go-ahead from this team, as the development process moves on and revenue starts getting tied to that feature, the money needs to flow back.
Yeah, they need to accrue some kind of ROI is what you're saying. I agree with that.
Even just like Disney points on paper, like Mickey Mouse points on paper.
It'll be that.
Something.
But still, you're right. There's justification at the end of the day. 5 ideas went through, and they're actually now in our product. What does that mean? What's the uptake with our customers, etc.? There's a way to do that, I imagine, right? Yeah. But I don't know if it's being done out there.
Well, it's not.
Yeah, that pretty much settles it.
All right. So as far as being strategic, there's another side to leadership. The visibility of seeing that you're putting effort into a thing without quarterly ROI, that in and of itself could be valuable to leadership. There still is something in this that is valuable, tangible.
Yeah, definitely, with a promise. One day this will become real. Yeah. So it's like almost making paper airplanes, but that's fine. The danger, again, I'm going to go to the other side, right? The danger is, with these executives, this leaves a back door clearly open for them to push through their pet projects.
Of course.
So all that stuff about getting positive signals from the market goes out the window.
The risk here is you will develop something that is disconnected from reality to be honest. This is why I hate the acronym MVP, because like MVP should be helping you in the case where you want to make sure that something that you're about to build has business viability. Meaning the business can sell it, the business can receive money from it, the business knows how to communicate its value, right? It fits well into like sales process and all that kind of stuff. And if you're building things completely disconnected from your current business model, what are you doing? Why are you even working on that? There's literally no other important things you could be working on. This is a big danger of farming off your innovation to another team, is they're going to go off and build you a bunch of cool tech stuff and put it on a shelf. Well, who pays those people's salaries building cool tech stuff? We did an episode on shared services versus...
that was quite early on, yeah.
It was a while ago. Arguing Agile 176, why shared services fail in Agile organizations. It should just be why shared services fail.
Period.
That was the one we were talking about, keep all my specialists outside the team, which is very similar to this topic of I'll keep all my innovation people, all my very special chosen children, outside of the teams, outside of the unwashed masses of the teams.
Yeah.
They'll do my special work.
It's not an uncommon model though, right? We've seen that in some organizations where they have things like Innovation Works, Skunk Works, product labs or digital labs. That's the specialist niche, right? They're the ones pushing the boundaries.
But the problem with that is, money aside, you're building a fully cross-functional team that doesn't actually work on any product. Yeah. That's kind of ludicrous. Are they talking to customers on a regular basis, or are they just doing internal facing work they think is cool, like cool tech developments? Because again, how long are you going to do that until the money runs out? Normal development teams doing product development, they have to deal with how long can we do this until the money runs out?
Yeah.
And this team doesn't.
I know it makes no sense, but I'd say a majority of the teams out there that are doing this are doing stuff because it's cool tech. It's the latest thing, so we're going to do it.
You'll end up with a non-viable product, either because the business case isn't around it, or it's not what customers need, or you just haven't done any actual testing in the field. You're just building things that you think are cool.
Even if there was a little traction beyond that, these specialist teams will then end up passing that tech to the development teams to integrate. And now you've got a situation where the dev teams are trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, right? Because the integration challenges don't come until then.
Right.
So you may as well just discover and integrate as and when needed.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure we just talked about 2 categories without giving points. I want to jump us over to, I think that this innovation team being separate is going to end up complicating your product roadmap and prioritization decisions, and also your ability to communicate your product roadmap, your goal setting apparatus in the business. It's going to complicate that. So if you do quarterly planning and stuff to say, oh, we're going to refocus our roadmap and decide what new goals we're going to attack. And then as we decide them, we're going to do some tests. And then the results of those tests land on the roadmap. Now you've got this other team saying, we did the thing and it was successful. I don't understand what you're doing. We did a thing for you. It was successful. Why are you sleeping on this? I, as a product manager, don't want to be in that position where I'm dealing with this other team that seems to be proceeding squarely from ego, saying, oh, I developed the thing in-house. Yeah. It's so great. What customers did you test that with? Why would I test with customers? How dare you questioning me or whatever? Get out of my office.
Yeah, we don't want reality here. For the sake of the podcast, I can argue the other side of it, even though I don't agree with it. The other side of it is, by having this specialist team do innovation, I'm removing the load from your dev teams to have to do that, right? And I'm in their sprint reviews, so I'm plugged in with them.
Yeah.
So that's the other side, is like, well, I'm reducing that load so they can develop. And we're constantly feeding them what to work on so they don't have to figure that stuff out. We're already doing that. So there's a lot. That's a fallacy.
I hear that from executives all the time. It's like, I'll just tell you. You don't have to do customer discovery and all that Marty cake and stuff. I'll just tell you what to do. Yeah. Also, why don't we just let this innovation team talk to all the customers, and then they can do all the discovery for us, and they can be the discovery team, and we'll be the delivery team. And we can divide the two sides of that diamond.
Yeah.
You see how slippery, like that slope?
I understand.
That slope wasn't even slippery. It took one step to get to that slope.
Straight down. It was an academic kind of argument against.
But a lot of what we're talking about today, the academic sanitized version of it, the run by accountants version of it, it does, like that step makes a lot of sense to those people.
Sure thing.
Also, it's terrible. So there's that too. All right, let's hit all of our points here. We talked about disconnecting the development with the reality of what customers need and the customer discovery process. Even if you have good customer discovery chops, now we're going to fight about it when you try to jam it into my roadmap or force it into my roadmap. Because if I'm a real product management or self-contained team that uses product discovery, I'm leading my own efforts as well. Now you're doing discovery efforts and I'm doing discovery efforts, and we're both working out of my backlog. So now we got two different teams saying we think this should be the next highest priority. So I want to cap the disconnected from customer needs category. I give no points because nobody deserves them in this category.
Agreed. Absolutely.
We didn't accomplish anything. And I want to deal with a much scarier category to me, which is we're setting up this innovation team so that they can test the boundaries and help us accelerate into the future. And we're claiming that it actually helps reduce organizational politics around innovation. Right. Because sometimes when you innovate, you're like, well, whose job is XYZ? Is it the engineer's job to do whatever? Is it the product manager to do whatever? Sometimes the product manager says that the developers aren't doing enough. Yeah. Or sometimes you have development organization where the developers don't want to talk to customers. I'll give you a great example. You ever been in an organization where you hear this term hands-on keyboards? They're like, why am I going to break away the developers to do this thing when they're not turning in productive coding time? They're just playing with new technologies. That's not counted against their utilization. So that, like, on paper, they suffer for bad metrics they're being judged on.
Right.
I agree. People are like Brian, that's a bad faith argument because they're bad metrics in the first place.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. But also, in order to get around all of the politics involved in like, well, I'd like to use your developers to talk to customers. I know they'll take a hit to their utilization. I don't care. I prefer them to do that. Brian, you can do that, but make sure they're above a certain percentage of these games. I'm talking large businesses. So I'm going to create this other team, and they're not judged by these metrics. They're kept away from these metrics. So again, we go back to the Deming. Oh boy, we're going back to the Deming podcast, Arguing Agile 199, because you set up a system and the system is just bad. It's a bad system. You should change that system. But also you're saying, well, we can set up this team. It's outside the system and we don't have to deal with all this politics. The reality though is we just outlined in the previous category, you don't have to deal with these politics, but also you just said, I'm going to test my innovations and your team is going to test their innovations. And then when we look at them together, we're going to say, I don't understand why you're not bringing my innovations into your roadmap and dealing with it as a high priority.
Or worse, when it fails, it's your stuff that failed, not mine. So yeah.
I implement your changes and then I don't see any advantage. No spike in customer usage, no extra money, no contracts sold, no nothing. Hey, I thought you tested this. Now we're playing the blame game. Now we're fighting.
Now saying, but Brian, if your development team did a good job of the product in the first place, yeah. This is horrible. But this is actually quite prevalent out there if you're working in this way with an innovation team.
Well, this is supposed to be lobbying for innovation teams to reduce organizational politics around innovation.
I don't know how you do that.
But I think actually I'm going to award a negative 110 points because I just don't like the case. It's terrible. It actually goes in the opposite direction. Negative 110 points for outsourcing innovation and plus 3 Scooby points. Scooby-Doo eating Scooby snacks. Plus 3 Scooby snacks.
Nice.
So another good point is probably the last point for the innovation outsourcing that we'll talk about today. They will say it bridges a gap between R&D and like traditional product development. Okay, like if you think about R&D, like meaning like I've got to have a specific pool of money and like I've got to dedicate it to spin up something, right? Like government, for example, or finance, for example, has specific terminology around what is considered R&D activity because the government can like spend money on R&D activities. Like, hey, I want to go create a new fighter aircraft or something like that. So the government is willing to give a certain amount of money. They do the same thing with like not military technology, other things. And companies do the same thing. I'm going to break off this much money, develop this maybe a new product line or a new innovation or something, right? New technology, doesn't matter what it is. So they'll say, well, this bridges the gap between building this completely new line of business, right? Disconnected from any of our other line of businesses. In reality, we can argue about how disconnected it really is. You're not going to jump into like, I'm a fintech company and I'm going to go start producing Hollywood movies. I don't think that's realistic. I think it's probably like a fintech company that also does something else adjacent to the fintech space.
Sure. Yeah. And probably leveraging a lot of what they already do.
Probably. Yeah. The idea here is like we have these concepts and they're born out of true R&D. Like I break some people off for a period of time with a run rate. Basically, I break off a subset of my company as a startup and I fund them to go figure something out. So like true R&D. And at the end of that process, they will help advise me how to roll it into my current portfolio offerings. So they're completely disconnected. They might be trying to break into a different market. They might not be cannibalizing features from other products or services. They might truly be exploring new boundaries. In that case, that makes a lot of sense to me.
I agree with that. It does make a lot of sense. I think, again, it's how you implement this structure, right? So you've got R&D, they're doing things, but are they also vetting the signals from the customer on what they're building, or are they just building it internally and then passing it to the dev team and see how you can use this?
You just identified the clear issue of this team is not staffed or potentially skilled to be maintaining production code in production. So probably the weakest part of this argument, which sounds great on paper, by the way. Like if I'm an accountant, this sounds great.
Easy budgeting, right? Yeah, and the R&D is a line item.
I put money in a bucket. This team takes it away, figures it out. They do amazing things. I can go to my tea parties or whatever at the end of the year. I don't know why I go to tea parties. But in reality, at some point, this innovation team has to hand off to a real team of engineers to build it, maintain it, and scale it.
Right.
Unless your organization is saying, all my teams that start outside of a existing product line start as like seed funding teams.
Right.
And then when they launch and hit new products, they break off and they go and maintain that product, and they come out of the seed pool, and then they become a fully formed product team. And then I staff them with more engineers. And the seed accelerator type of organization hires more people to launch more products. That it's not quite the situation we're talking about today,
no.
But that could work.
And often it works in the guise of establishing JDAs with other companies who potentially are maybe your customers. So you're actually working together in the same room as reps from the customer. But again, that's not a model that's very widely used
I would
today.
say I don't know anybody that does that, to be honest. There could even be a bidding process at the end of the creation of technology where you bid it out to sell it to companies. Like, hey, we did this innovation. It works. Here's the way it works. We have no intention of maintaining it. We're going to sell it to somebody else. Your incubation business unit could basically auction off
that product.
They're auctioning off nascent technology. But at the point where I would come in as a product manager with a team, do I have to re-architect the whole thing to scale it to forget like 10 users, like 1,000 users? Like I at the point where I have to rebuild the whole architecture, it's almost not even worth my time.
Yeah.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. There's a lot of it depends in this category.
Yeah, there is.
So does it really bridge the gap between true R&D and product development? I don't know if any, like the for and against seem to balance out here. A single point in each category.
There we go.
1 point. Okay. 1 point. Yeah, my pen doesn't work anymore. It's 1 point if my pen actually wrote it. We'll figure that out later.
A smudge for every team.
A single smudge, a pox against your house. Let's see, what else? Another category is the claim that this team, being separate and only doing innovation, actually accelerates time to market for new concepts, in the idea that the team doing innovation can launch ideas into production and have people using it. Pretend for a second that this innovation team has good knowledge of scaling practices and deployment technology, and they can create a vertical slice. Maybe their vertical slices all start with, it's got to be integrated with our authentication and our deployment technology. Right. If we're really using Azure for authentication, you log in with your Microsoft account for everything. That's the backbone of all our technology. Yeah. You log in with Microsoft, and then we deploy you to the Azure cloud services. I don't know what they use. Kubernetes. I don't know what they use. And whatever containers Azure uses. I have no idea. So like there's a bedrock of technology that my innovation team is required by my engineering leads to use. So they are launching full stack, vertical slice, working applications. The functionality is tiny, right?
Yeah.
So they're
but it's still valuable.
Yeah, they're valuable. They have customers that sign up for the trial. The way I think about this is like they're launching things into an alpha slice. It is working. It's in your app. It's part of your package. And if you want to expand on the features outside of the alpha or the beta, then a real product team has to take it over. Or maybe the company has to hire a whole team around it. But that initial go-to-market of like, how are we going to find the right customers? How are we going to launch? What order are we going to do things in? This team could become experts at that specialty of go-to-market. A lot of people fumble go-to-market.
Sure.
When you say go-to-market, like in the Agile space specifically, and you say go-to-market, most people have no idea what you're talking about.
So in this structure where you have an innovation team, because they're not doing anything but innovation, then the go-to-market, essentially your time to market is as low as it can be. That's a good thing, as long as they're speaking with customers, etc. So they're not building things that nobody wants.
If you're actually going to market, you absolutely would have to.
You have to partner with them. That makes sense. This is, I think, the strongest point so far.
I think 100 points here and no points against, because I think if you do this right, I probably can think of ways to mess this up. But the constraints that we put on this innovation team already was like, you got to use our deployment technology. Basically, the engineering lead or VP or something came to the innovation team and is like, you guys are cute. I love what you're doing. One day you'll be real product people. But until then, you got to use our authentication. You got to use our deployment technology.
These are our in-house standards.
Our standards are non-negotiable. Whatever you do, it's got to be a certain level of quality. You can't be launching garbage, and that's non-negotiable.
Adherence to internal standards is a prerequisite here for this team, because they could develop something in a completely different stack, for example. It won't fit when they turn around and say, hey, look, this is fantastic. Go put in your products. No, It doesn't work that way. Well, yeah, I agree. They have to adhere to internal standards for sure.
It would help them, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, that was a little gem we found. I didn't expect to agree with that one as much as I did. I assume whoever's on these innovation teams, like they should be senior developers compared to most of the other program developers.
Yeah.
There's some assumptions in this podcast.
But you could also rotate people in and out of this team
Absolutely.
from your dev team so they grow.
And you probably should.
You should.
You probably should. You probably shouldn't build this team completely from outside, because this is a great short meaning like 6 months, right? This is a great short-term thing to reinvigorate your developers, to let them remember why they got in development in the first place, to play with cool technology and to do cool things, to talk to people and to figure out, oh, I can solve that. We have a couple points that we need to specifically talk about that are like pushback on this. One of which is it perpetuates building flashy demos, like an innovation theater, like the old Marty Kagan product theater, except in the bad form of it. Is like, it's the illusion of innovation. But in actuality, no customers have ever said they wanted to use it. Nobody ever said that was their pain point. You don't know if you can sell it. You don't know if it'll scale. All of these things fit in this category.
Absolutely agree.
Is that the end of the category? Okay.
Well, there's only that one we talked about. The scale we touched on earlier.
We did, yeah.
Struggling to transition to scale. So
I mean, the same thing is like someone's going to bring me and be like, oh, I think when you use the same data that's in your application, but I use it in this other way, it looks more attractive. Well, why don't we just do that in a normal application? Like, why do we need to separate that out? Like that, if it doesn't get us any more additional money from customers, I don't know. There's still, in the back of my head in this whole conversation, there's a need to justify the cost of this innovation team in the back of my head. Maybe some companies, that's not necessary. Maybe some companies, like the need to identify new and interesting different ways to potentially monetize the application that maybe we're not thinking of. Maybe that in and of itself is strategic enough where they're willing to spend the money of whatever the salaries of this team cost to do that. Like it's like rolling the dice. It's like, listen, you know, if you go to Vegas, how much money to roll the dice to get $1 million? Like, how much money are you willing to bet for each roll of the dice to get that $1 million chance? That's this category right now.
To take that analogy further, you know who wins there, right? Look at all those big buildings, the casinos. So I think the same thing applies here.
With businesses, over the longer term, the number of times you roll that dice,
it's going to come up at least once.
That financial impact could be leveraged over a longer period of time.
Sure.
It's just like capitalizing assets. There's a certain number of rolls that you will make, that you will budget to make, and the cost of this team, or more than one team, over a period of time fills in this number. So how much money do you want to spend to try to get ahead?
Right.
And then that's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is, can you show me that you actually did get ahead? That's not necessarily ROI that I'm asking for. Where are the breakthroughs that the normal product teams couldn't have made by themselves? Show me the places that the product teams just move forward on their own. I want to see both of them. Every team should be saying, this is where we move forward with our own kind of business viability, product discovery type of efforts. Every team should have that anyway. Show me where another team handed me the innovation opportunity that they had pre-vetted for me,
that I couldn't have done myself.
Maybe like that's the part where I was hoping you wouldn't break that out, because you could have done that yourself if corporate, rather than going to this other team, would have just come to the team doing the work in the first place. All my arguments break down when, let's say the innovation team, each individual fully loaded with benefits and everything, let's say they cost like $250,000 per person.
Yeah.
So you got 4 people on the team, right? Product manager, 3 developer, product manager, UX person, 2 developers. Right, a senior developer and a normal developer, fully loaded with benefits and everything. Let's call it $250,000 per person, $1 million. 4 people, $1 million. You're spending $1 million a year to push the boundaries of innovation.
Right.
And what you just pointed out, like, I don't think I'm going to get away from it in any category we've talked about. It's like, why don't you just take that money and give it to the individual teams to say, hey, I'm giving you additional money. You have your margin that you run your business or your product on. The business is going to inject some money into your margin, make your margin look a little bit better. And what I want from giving you this money is, when you come back to the corporate strategy, quarterly planning type of events, show me which innovation strategy you're picking over another. Show me which exploratory technology you've tried and which one you've picked over another.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm funding. I'm buying some time in your roadmap to figure out what the next innovation is. That's it. That's what I'm buying. And the most impactful pushback against that is like, we got enough features and enough new innovations that we've already baked in the roadmap where we're like, we don't need the extra money.
But we're too busy to do exactly what we need to do now.
That sounds to me like we're too busy to improve. That's what it sounds like.
It sounds like that. It can actually come down like that. But if you're giving me $1 million, I can hire a couple of people maybe. So in the other scenario where you are funding a separate innovation team, that you get away with for a bit until there's a change in leadership, which, let's face it, is quite frequent.
Sure.
And then you get somebody new in and they form a department of corporate efficiency. And then they send a memo out saying, list 10 things you've done last week. And off goes this innovation team. When that happens, you lose all that domain knowledge that these people have acquired, pushing the boundaries. It's suddenly gone, right? And well, the organization will suffer badly.
I feel that like the for outsourcing to innovation, I don't feel they've picked up any points in this category at this point, sadly. And I feel the against has picked up
25 apples.
Exactly, 25 apples. I wanted to award that one a bit more fairly. It sounds like it's too easy to do it wrong. Like a lot of points we talked about in that category, they sound like they would be really cool, especially the idea of funding as a vehicle to punch you ahead. That's really what everything we're talking about here comes back down. If you strip it all away, it's about I need an investment to punch me ahead. So you can give that investment and cordon it off to this other team and make it somebody else's job, or you just give it to the team and be like, oh, you know what? How about we'll hire a data scientist, or we'll hire another UX person or whatever to conduct more user interviews.
So one thing it does if you do that is it makes it easy to attribute the success that results from that to the team. Whereas in the other scenario where you have an innovation team, how do you attribute a portion of the success to them? That doesn't make sense. There's no easy equation that says we went to market with this led by this team, so how do you attribute that to them? Because the dev teams will say, well, we did the work.
Right.
So, yeah, it's easier if the dev team's doing everything.
Let's cut straight to the spice argument I want to make, which is it sounds like you've introduced a handoff in between when the innovation is done and when the product development begins. It sounds like you're like, oh, I did all of the innovation over here on this side of the diamond, and then I did all the development. Discovery was all done over here, and development was all done over here. We talked about this earlier in the podcast, but I want to make a point in this category to say you're transferring knowledge and ownership of the feature and all the learnings and everything. Theoretically, you're transferring them. In reality, you don't really transfer them. The people that are implementing it should be the ones who have the learning and should be the ones who've been involved the whole time. But with this setup, I doubt that very much. And also, double also, this is my second also, with a handoff, like the team that implemented the original, like, oh, I think this is viable for the business, and they put together this prototype or clickable wireframes where they put together, like, they don't have to maintain it full-time forever. They don't have to be up in the middle of the night at all. Their decision that this was a good idea is completely divorced from the reality I believe in. If you build it, you should own it.
You're not going to get any argument from me against that, unfortunately, because that is exactly the issue. People that are creating these prototypes aren't necessarily considering some of those illities like scalability, etc., right? They don't care about that because their focus is on just getting it to work and do those flashy demos. So yeah, absolutely. They also don't build in considerations for maintenance, right? Long-term maintenance of the product, its longevity. They don't consider that. The dev team has to live with it.
Well, because of that, I'm going to award outsourcing innovation to another team. I'm going to award it a negative 10 illities, and against outsourcing plus 10 illities.
Cool.
So there's a mix of illities happening right now.
Awesome.
There's a silos discussion that's happening here that we are not talking about, like, because we probably talk about silos too often, but that's kind of what's happening here. You're building silos, but all the innovation happens over here in this side of the diamond, and all the development happens, like all the grunt work happens. I'll just tell you what to build. How long until that innovation team devolves into just one VP who just tells, oh, I talked to the customer once, who doesn't have any interviewing skills, who doesn't have any business analysis skills. You're on a super slippery slope here. And that's aside from the categories we didn't talk about today. Like, what if your innovation team is suggesting things that are completely duplicative of features that you have already.
Right. That is a real danger if they're not communicating well, right? So you're going to have two separate solutions being built in parallel.
Or their level of expertise.
Right.
They might just not know. There's domain expertise and there's technical expertise. So unless they're going to become technical experts in your software and your infrastructure, and also in your business, they could be missing some stuff when they're building. Like, oh, we'll build this new product. It's like if you could have all of your CSV material, but in a grid. I'm like, guys, that's Microsoft Excel. What? We didn't know that. We just spent 6 months creating this grid-based editor. Come on.
Right. Well, this is another argument for having your team members circulate between those two teams, right?
Yeah, that would make sense.
I mean, it's a solid against argument, though.
It is. Well, it's a solid against argument, so I'll award another 10 points in against and 0 points for. So let's do a quick tallying of all the points for this podcast.
Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. It's complicated.
Actually, the 4 outsourcing side actually had a bunch of points. Believe it or not. All right, I calculated all the points. It looks like the 4 outsourcing innovation got 190 points, but it got minus 10 ilities. So that's a serious condemnation.
Yes, it is. Big penalty there.
And then the against outsourcing, which I don't know about my record keeping, but it got 121 points, significantly less points. But then it also got a plus 10 ilities.
Oh, they clearly win.
So that's enough to clinch the category alone, even if it wasn't for the monkeys or the bananas.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Hey, I think the points are clear. You should do innovation as part of your normal product management teams. It shouldn't be someone else's job. It's your job. If you build it, you own it.
You innovate it, you build it, and you run it. Thank you for staying with us, and let us know what you think about the content today and what else you'd like us to tackle. And don't forget, like and subscribe down below.